got this plan. If we could convince the temple president, just let us go out next week and we'll just collect. And then I'll go to India, because I've already bought deities, but I'll go to India and I'll get Radha and Krishna for Amsterdam. So we did that. The temple president got totally bewildered, and we were like so enthusiastic, and he agreed to this plan. And I went to Delhi, and then the place to go for deities is Jaipur. And while I was in Delhi, I picked up a young lady who had been with me in England previously. And usually it's not, you don't just immediately find, you have to look around, you have to maybe have some adjustments. Somehow or other, there they were, these beautiful Radha Krishna. And I also saw this beautiful Lalita Vishaka. And I'm just like, well, they just got to come. So everything was put together, ready to go, ready to send to Amsterdam. And then when I got back to Amsterdam, I said, now we need to have a proper throne, It just can't be on some table or something. And I designed a marble altar that would accommodate Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev, Lalita Vishaka, and we figured Gaura-Nitai will probably show up, so nice altar. And I took a train and went to Carrara, which is in Italy. That's where the marble work is done. And I took my little drawing, which was not at all professional, but it was very clear how things should be. And I met a devotee from Rome who introduced me to one artisan there. So it was agreed upon. He would get it together, he would send it in pieces, but marked carefully so that we could put it together when it arrived in Amsterdam. And the train happened to stop in Paris on the way back. And I thought, wow, there's a very long space of time. I've never seen the deities in Paris that were installed personally by Srila Prabhupada. Let me go there. And when I went there, it turned out my GBC was also there. And he had no idea about this plan. And he was a little surprised, but what are you doing? So I told him, and he was supportive, he liked the plan. So then everything went along, the deities were installed, and my daughter sat in for the fire yajna because beads had been chanted on for her by Srila Prabhupada on the rooftop in Bombay when we were at Juhu before things were built. So we would have these little evening programs on the rooftops. And one time I was thinking, it says in the Bhagavatam you shouldn't have children, or if you can't liberate your family, you just shouldn't do it. And I'm thinking, I can't do that. So the only hope would be Srila Prabhupada could initiate my daughter. And at that time, my daughter was in the Gurukul in Dallas, Texas. I was in India. She was halfway around the world to go to school, but we weren't there. So we don't do that anymore, and please don't think of doing that again. So I went up to the little program ended, and I just sat there, and probably he nodded, told me to come. He said, "Is there anything?" And I just blurted out, "Will you initiate Saraswati?" He'd given her that name at birth. "Will you initiate Saraswati?" Just blurted it out. And he said something very interesting. He said, "They were already initiated, but I was so dull. Instead of saying, 'What do you mean?' I said, 'But will you initiate Saraswati?'" And he could see he wasn't going to get through to me. So he said, bring beads, because I had them. And he chanted on the beads, and he hands them back. And her name will be Miss Saraswati Devi, which it already was. And she may sit in on the next yajna, So in the meantime, the school in Dallas had closed down. And that was also interesting because we didn't have ways of communicating like we do now, our little hello, in your hand, everything's there. So I didn't even know, most of us didn't even know. The school got closed down and some kids were sent to Montreal, which included my daughter, but I didn't know that. And then, because then they found out, okay, I'm in Europe, there's the school in France, we have a very nice school at the Nouvelle Mayaport. So she was sent to France. I didn't even know it. I was at that point based in France as a base, but I was spending time up in Denmark. Just things were like a little bit different in those days. And then I found out my daughter was there, and the Didis were coming, what date they would arrive. And the marble altar came, and everything got put together, so then there was going to be the installation of Shri Radha Gopinath and Lalita Bishaka, and my daughter would sit in on the fire yajna. By that time, she's like 7 years old. The Jaya Tirtha, who was preeminent in Devi worship etiquette, he said to her, after all the rituals were done, so what are the 4 rules and regulations? And she said, like no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, and no illicit sex. And when she said that, no illicit sex, everybody kind of laughed a little bit because, she's just this like little girl. And that way she got initiated. And then later on, there was, I was no longer in Holland, and things changed, the situation changed. And we had these 2 huge beauty buildings on the canals. How they have canals in Holland. Anyway, we lost the buildings, and the Didis were sent to Radhadesh in Belgium, to where they still remain nowadays. And they have wonderful programs there, big kirtan programs, and they have a college there, so it worked out. So that was, and then I just actually if I start talking about deities, I won't get to my class, but I just recently spent a month in South America, the whole month of December. And in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, beautiful Gorni Thai. And this year is their 50th anniversary. And during this time, I found out that at a certain point, there was a huge uprising with the government. There's always uprisings in these countries. And the devotees' very lives were threatened. So the devotees and the deities had to get out of Argentina at risk of losing their lives. And there was one lady, she smuggled the deities out, got on a plane and took them to Brazil. And the other devotees, she got 11 devotees into Brazil on different conveyances. So they were in exile for some time in Brazil, and during that time in Sao Paulo, their own Gornitais were installed, so they both were there. And then once the crisis of government and whatever, they came back. They're now there. So this year they have their celebration of 50 years, but during that 50 years, they spent a few years in exile. So I was going to speak just a little bit about women in ISKCON. And because I've already spoken a bit, maybe I'll skip the Jai Radha Madhava if you don't mind, and just move into the topic. Om Gyan Tamarandasya Janana Sakalaya Chaktum Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. And everybody please chant Srila Prabhupada's pranams. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Saraswati Dasa Dharane. Hello.
Few of them online are saying it's
So the topic of this little talk is Women in ISKCON. And right now, as we sit here, I'm not going to go into the whole huge chaotic details, but there is some concerning elements in terms of the role and the positions of women in ISKCON, which have, for years, we've been moving along, we've been serving along, and suddenly there's some little hubris. And maybe some people have heard a little bit about it, some little, that's how things are sometimes. But I wanted to speak from Srila Prabhupada's perspective and our perspective. And maybe I'll just mention it now just in case I forget, that there's a book called A Bond of Love, Srila Prabhupada and His Daughters. Have any of you seen this or heard that? Great. So it is available on Amazon.com. It's only $20. And it is a book with the stories of many, I forget how many, maybe like 300 little stories of lady disciples of Srila Prabhupada and their experiences with Srila Prabhupada. Because in general, most of the information was coming on the side of the men, the information that we had. But the ladies had a wonderful, rich, and very, very unique relationship with Srila Prabhupada. We were very much part of the picture that was going on. And not so many people realize that. So I do suggest this is a book not just for ladies. It's a documentary, you could say. And it should be read and understood. Srila Prabhupada repeatedly requested his followers to regularly read his books. And since most of us are conditioned souls, we may bring our conditioning into the reading of his books as a result. And the result is that not having a completely balanced understanding. So we can look at some of the ways his teachings can be misunderstood and some reasons why such misunderstandings may occur. And I want to give credit to my god sister, Vishakadevi Dasi, who is the wife of Yadubar, who together they have done most of the cinematography and photographs in ISKCON of Srila Prabhupada. And Vishakadevi Dasi is the temple president at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and she's got a brilliant mind, Interesting thing about her, just like Prahlad Maharaj had an atheistic father, Vishaka's mother and father were both atheists, and she was brought up an atheist. And Prahlad would preach at school to his young classmates about Krishna, but Vishaka would preach about atheism. But Krishna caught her. So the Hare Krishna movement has been around for well over 50 years now. And still we're sorting out this major topic of our culture in terms of, what's the place of women? What's the role of women? What should we do? What should we not do? And a number of factors contribute to the dissension perpetually swirling on about this topic. The male, some of the things are understandable. There's male, female, psychological tendencies, Men tend to have a feeling of superiority towards women. It's like a natural thing. And then women, we tend to defer to men, And when we came to Prabhupada's movement, we brought with us a different culture, societal, familial, personal expectations about what men and women can and cannot do, they should not do. And our understanding of Srila Prabhupada's statements, his example and mood related to women, it varied widely. We made mistakes, some past and present values and customs of traditional India as Vaishnava values taught by Srila Prabhupada. We may have according to our background, our experience, have some different, maybe, understanding initially. And then there's the natural sexual attraction between men and women, which is sometimes overlooked or minimized at our own peril. And of course, nowadays, there's a lot of attractions that go on. So the result of a woman being chaste and supported by her husband is that they actually gain great power. They become powerful women. Ravana was defeated by Sita's curse. Gandhari, Kunti, Devahuti, illustrious, powerful women. Srila Prabhupada wrote that Gandhari, although a woman, was no less than Bhishma Dev in character. And Krishna clearly says that women are eligible for the highest destination. Bhagavad Gita 9:32. And Srila Prabhupada confirmed Draupadi attained the same destination as her exalted husbands. But at the end, they're walking north. She, Subhadra, one other, they had to fend for themselves. And they did. And they were successful. In Vaishnavism, qualification is not based on the body, but on the consciousness of the individual. Like have the wives of the Kaliya serpent. And actually these ladies, the wives of the Kaliya, everybody here know the Kaliya serpent? But if you don't know it, like, everybody knows that story? You can say no if you don't, then I'll give you a short, Kaliya serpent was in the river Jamuna, a Naga, many-headed, and spreading poison and venom. His wives were devotees of Krishna. And they were themselves surrendered even devotees. And according to the acharyas, the great teachers, they often tried to convince her husband, surrender to Krishna. You're giving so much problems to people. Just surrender to Krishna. But, sometimes the husbands don't want to listen to the wives for various reasons. Sometimes the wives are a little naggy, let's be honest, Women know how to really push buttons sometimes, And sometimes it's just that they're not going to listen. So that was clear. He just wasn't going to listen. But at a certain point, he found himself in unbearable agony. And he remembered the advice of his wives and finally took shelter of Lord Krishna. You can read about this in the Krishna book, 10th canto, 16th chapter. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one of our previous acharyas, explained that Kaliya's wives, the great devotees of Krishna, had been disgusted with their husband due to his demoniac activities. And they'd been thinking, let this atheist be killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then we'll be widows and we'll just worship Krishna. Because they knew if he was killed by Krishna, he would get a better destination. But after Krishna danced on Kaliya's hoods, his wives understood that Kaliya had taken shelter of the Lord within his mind. And becoming humble and remorseful, they thought, now our husband is becoming a Vaishnava. We must try to protect him. And although Krishna had killed other demons, he spared Kaliya because his wives were great devotees. And the Lord offered Kaliya loving affection. And then he withdrew both Kaliya's offenses against the Lord's devotee Garuda and against the residents of Vrindavan, who were very dear to him, meaning dear to Krishna. So this was the power of the Nagapati Vaishnavas, that they had the power to induce their husband, who was just so demoniac and disgusting and vile, have a change of heart. And he got the direct mercy of Krishna. So how did Prabhupada translate service opportunities for women, for ladies? He transplanted an entire culture from one age, from one millennium, to a different age and environment. And while he left the message of that culture intact, he also had to make application of the culture to make it practical and appealing for young people at a time different from the actual, as we say, Vedic era. So here was young people with no orientation or experience with that culture. For the most part, we'd rejected the culture of our own society. Many of us had become accustomed to drugs and even promiscuity. And although shockingly contrary to the mood of the day, from the beginning, Srila Prabhupada encouraged us to get married and be responsible and give up these distracting habits. So then there are uncomfortable and controversial statements about women that we sometimes find in the scriptural verses. People know what I'm referring to, you know? Read the books, you will know. And you find them in Prabhupada's writings. For example, Prabhupada writes, a man's psychology and women's psychology are different. We have to agree to that, it's a fact. As constituted by bodily frame, a man always wants to be like in charge, superior. And the woman is naturally inferior. But by inferior here, we're not implying a lesser. Just like you may say the children, younger children, they were inferior, but not inferior as not being good enough. Just, they were small. And the natural instinct is that the husband wants to post himself as superior to the wife. And it says, so this is in Bhagavatam 3:23, so this must be observed. Now, many ladies, particularly with a Western background, when they read something like that, it's just like a bit of a shock. Men and women do have different psychologies, and to ignore or defy or try to correct these natural psychological bends, it can make a relationship very difficult. So these statements, such statements are helpful in a way, not just for husband-wife relationships, but any relationships between male and female. There was an article in the New York Times in 2017, and they were talking about Angela Merkel. Now, she was the Chancellor of Germany. You couldn't have a higher role. It was like we have a man here called our president, so she was like that equal, like that position in Germany. And she spent her political career kind of downplaying her gender. She shunned the feminist label. She was very modest. She was cautious, made diligent preparations. And to honor that male-female psychology, her leadership almost seemed invisible because she painstakingly would build consensus behind the scenes. And she avoided taking credits for the idea that she had originated. She would convince behind the scenes and then you take that forward. Well, actually, it was her. But to avoid this, pushback. So this is one way that women can deal with the male psychological tendency to dominate. We have a very overbearing, overconfident president, so I don't think anything like that would work with him. Fortunately, we don't have to deal with do it. So there's another touchy statement of Srila Prabhupada from the Madhya Lila, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Every person must get married. Every woman especially must get married. So Prabhupada also said, if one can remain without marriage, that's first class, and he was referring to brahmacharis. So Rupanuga, who at the time he was the president in DC, goes, women also, they can remain without marriage if they can. Prabhupada said, women also. What's the use of this material husband? Make Krishna your husband. Krishna is prepared to become everything. Love him as a husband, love him as a son, love him as a friend. This is the conversation in Washington, D.C. in 1967. So Prabhupada is broad-minded, he's encompassing, he's not small-minded or narrow-minded. And his idea is we become Krishna conscious, whether we're married or not. And throughout his writings and his various talks and discussion, he leaves room for individuality on how we actually achieve Krishna consciousness. It's not like, boom, like that, and you have no wiggle room, you know. He just wants us to love Krishna. Here's another statement. If one becomes Krishna conscious, then she doesn't require a husband. Now, we know becoming Krishna conscious is not such an easy thing. But she knows that Krishna is my protector. Why shall I artificially seek after father or husband? What protection for a few days either the father or the son or the husband may give? Real protection is Krishna. That was in January of '67 in Bombay. And I had a god sister named Nandalal. And he gave her a small silver Krishna. And he told her, you make him your husband. And she did that. She was an extraordinary Vaishnavi. So there's many examples of women in our movement who are not protected by a father, a husband, or a son. You know, at this point, I was married, I had a child, you know, I went through that, and now I'm not an active married person. So I myself is one, Mukhya Devi Dasi, who is the temple president of the largest ISKCON community in North America, that means Alachua. Kaishori, who is the, practically many books that you get outside of the regular BBT books, you will see her name there as the editor. You know, how many of you have read Shyam Sundar's books, Chasing the Rhinos with the Swami? One of you, yeah. So many books written by disciples of Srila Prabhupada about Prabhupada, and she's the one they go to, Kaishori. She's not married. Prashanta Devi Dasi, she runs the VIHE, Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education. She didn't inherit it, she established it. Vishaka Priya, another one. She was from South Africa, Western Body, South Africa. And Giriraj Swami said he would finance an ashram for ladies in Vrindavan, but it had to be built. I don't know if you knows what it means to build anything in India, but you have to be ruthless. You have to be prepared to do deals under the table, on top of the table, behind the table. It's just tough. She didn't even speak Hindi, and somehow or other, she managed by sheer determination to get this beautiful ashram, Kirtan ashram, built. It's on the Parikrama Marg. So ladies do play a part. We have a significant role. And each of us not only feel protected, because we also make significant contributions to ISKCON. So it is possible for women to teach, to lead, as the Nagapatni did with Kaliya, as well as the Brahmana's wives. You know, when the Brahmana's wife, Krishna Balaram, they're hungry, he says, go bring something. And they went to the Brahmanas, and the Brahmanas were in the middle of a yajna, and they got really, get out of here, you, what are you up to, you know, we're doing our puja. And they went back to Krishna, what can we do? They wouldn't give us anything, go to their wives. And the wives were cooking for the yajna that their husband was doing. But as soon as they heard Krishna and Balaram were hungry, right away, here, take. At the end, when their husbands saw what their wives had done, they became humbled. You know? So the actual system is that the husband is spiritual master to the wife. But if the wife can bring her husband into practicing this process, then it's all right for the husband to accept the wife as the spiritual master. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that anyone who knows the science of Krishna, that person should be accepted as spiritual master, regardless of any so-called qualifications such as rich man, woman, are Brahmana or Sudra. And this was written in a letter to Shilavati Devi Dasi in 1969. In this letter, Prabhupada affirms the precedent set by the Nagapadis, the wives of the Brahmana and the wives of the Brahmanas, were meant to be personal, were meant to appreciate each other's qualities and to avoid prejudging anyone based on gender stereotypes. So this and other statements are generalizations or guidelines intended to give us informed direction. So generalizations, by definition, are inferred from specific cases and are not meant to be applied indiscriminately. Whereas universal statements, such as we're spirit souls, they're always true in every circumstance. Another example of Krishna's pastimes on how qualification is not based on body but consciousness is because the wives of the Brahmanas were great devotees of the Lord. The foolish Brahmanas received spiritual benefit and finally came to their senses. 10th Canto Bhagavatam. And taking note of their wives' pure transcendental devotion for Lord Krishna and seeing their own lack of devotion, the Brahmanas felt very sorrowful and they began to condemn themselves. In other words, they woke up. So the Brahmanas' husbands noted that their wives, having perfected the transcendental attachment for Krishna, they did not have even a trace of attachment for home, husband, children, and so forth. And therefore, from that day on, the husbands accepted those women as their worshipable spiritual masters, and they no longer thought of them as my wife. Clearly, the scriptures, like Krishna, direct us past the bodily designation to the essence of each individual, to his or her bhakti. During the cornerstone laying ceremony in Mayapur, which was in 72, there was many of Prabhupada's godbrothers came. And that was very significant because up until that time they had avoided, they'd even criticized him. And, they look at Swami Maharaj, he's gone to America and associated with the Malachas, they were not, very understanding. But they came to the cornerstone ceremony and Prabhupada's sannyasis, his own sannyasis were there, my godbrothers with their dundas. So we're all kind of thinking, who's he going to ask to speak? Because for sure he would ask, who did he ask to speak? Malati Devi Dasi. I'm totally not a Shastri, type of person. I mean, I understand the philosophy, but I'm not somebody who can spit out mantras but he was asking me to speak, so I had to stand up and speak. And the only thing I could speak of with great certainty was Srila Prabhupada. I explained how it was we were there with him. And afterwards, one of my godbrothers, Gargamuni Maharaj, he came to me and he said, that was very nice. And when he said that, I realized, yes, that's why Prabhupada asked me to speak, because his godbrothers were extremely learned, and they were also elderly. So if any of our young sannyasis had tried to speak, they would have been critical, but they wouldn't have been critical of me, a woman who was glorifying her spiritual master. In Juhu, similarly, Srimati Devi Dasi was helping Prabhupada with the ceremony of putting Anantadev in the ground at Hare Krishna land. And then one time there was a conversation going on, and Prabhupada was talking about a couple. This couple had done amazing service. They went to Iran together, the couple, with their 2 young daughters. I mean, that was a pretty brave thing to do. And Prabhupada said, both of them are very intelligent, And Nandarani is more intelligent than her husband. I know that. And this other devotee man, he goes, well, I find he's very intelligent, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, Dayananda, yes. Prabhupada said, yeah, he's intelligent. But Nandarani is still more intelligent. I know that. Both of them are intelligent. But this girl appears to be more intelligent. And then there was another one. I don't know how many of you know Pradyumna, Prabhupada's Sanskrit scholar. So he was had a young boy's son, Aniruddha. And one of the servants of Prabhupada said, Aniruddha is intelligent like his father. And Prabhupada said, no, he's intelligent like the mother. She's more intelligent. His mother's name was Arundhati. So to understand the women are less intelligent in statement, that's the statement that really gets people like, what is this? So we need to understand and consider what intelligence means in this or another context. So in Sanskrit, there are several words that are translated as intelligence. And one is buddhi, which refers to the ability to analyze, to judge, or discern. Another one is medha. From the 10th chapter of the Gita, Krishna lists medha as one of the 7 feminine qualities. And medha means mental vigor or wisdom, prudence. So from Prabhupada's purport on 1034, the ability not only to read many books on different subject matters, but to understand them and apply them when necessary is intelligence, is medha, another opulence. So these are broad classifications. Buddhi is analytical intelligence, and medha means the nourishing, practical intelligence. And Krishna is so kind. He doesn't show special favor only to one who's a great philosopher. He knows the sincerity of purpose, and for this reason, women generally assemble in greater number in religious functions. Prabhupada mentions in every country and in every sect of religion, it appears that women are more interested than the men. And this is in a purport from 1.8. 8 is the prayers of Queen Kuti. And in China, for example, the movement in China is quite flourishing. But if you look at the pictures, you're like, where are the men? It's like 90% women, and intelligent women, very bright women. They have understood and come to Krishna consciousness. I remember one time there was a big program in India, and basically the audience was practically only women. And like Prabhupada said, where are the men? One guess, where were the men? Cricket. There was a big match. So the women didn't care about some little foolish ball. They were there to hear about Krishna. However, both women and men, they have buddhi and they have meta types of intelligence. It's a matter to what degree. So we need to avoid jumping to conclusions about a person or a group of people based on what the body they're wearing around their intelligence. And one of the beauties of Krishna consciousness is that we see past all the bodily, or we should be seeing past bodily and mental differences to a higher spiritual truth. And when we become devotees, we transcend all the designations, and thus the Krishna consciousness movement can unite all people, whatever their religion, whatever their race, whatever their nationality, whatever their age, whatever their gender. The Hare Krishna movement is meant to be at the forefront of implementing equal vision. What time is the, because
Maybe 5-10 minutes and then we can have question and answer session.
okay. So Srila Prabhupada's consistent goal is to help us transcend all material designations. He wants each of us to see and advance spiritually. Women, Sudras, Vaishyas are ordinarily regarded as less intelligent. But if one takes to Krishna consciousness, one is most intelligent. Although Kunti had the body of a woman, she was a devotee, and therefore she was not an ordinary, unintelligent woman. She was the most intelligent because she recognized Krishna to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How many of you have heard of Chanaka Pandit? Yeah. How many of you have heard this infamous statement by Chanaka Pandit? Never place your faith in a woman or a politician. How many of you have heard that one? A few of you are brave enough to raise your hand. So one time, Srila Prabhupada, when in Jamuna's presence and in the presence of others, he repeated that adage, never trust a woman or a politician. And then he looked her in the eye and he laughed and he goes, so what do you think, Jamuna? And Jamuna, right back, she goes, of course it's true, Srila Prabhupada. And when she said that, he became very grave and he looked at her with great feeling and he said, but you are not a woman, you are a Vaishnavi. One time in Calcutta, it was a very awkward situation. How many have been to the Calcutta temple? Yeah. So, I mean, it's the same temple way back when. And it was very awkward, the situation. It was, when Prabhupada was there was a bathroom for the men could use that one. Otherwise, there was only one bathroom for the men and women to use. And it wasn't divided up, and there was a door at each side because the women, to get to where we stayed, which was up on the roof, had to walk through that bathroom. And sometimes somebody would forget to unlock the door, and then we'd be stuck on one side or the other. And in those days, the water only came on at certain times, so you had to fill up containers. I don't know if any of you Indians nowadays, the older ones maybe, but water came on at certain times, so you had to fill up your water containers. Otherwise, you have to wait till the next day. So being Westerners, we just weren't used to that, so sometimes we'd forget. And there we'd be, no water for the basics. So it was just a very awkward situation. And then somebody would forget to lock the door, but you'd be doing something and somebody opened the door. Oh, no, sorry, So the men were just, the brahmacharis, so the brahmacharis especially, they were just like, they couldn't take it. It was so awkward. So they were thinking of a solution. And what was their solution? Let's get rid of the women. The women can go just live somewhere else. Like where else, who knows, but get rid of the women. So they decided one day they were going to tell their solution to Srila Prabhupada. Now every day Prabhupada would go on a morning walk. And during that morning walk, myself, Kaushalya, and Kalika, I would cook. They would clean and dress the deities. I was Prabhupada's cook. We'd do this all quickly while he was out on the walk. And then we could know when he was coming back, we'd hear his cane up on the wooden stairs. So then we'd run to the door and we'd open the door and we'd be standing there smiling. So on that day, the men, they were telling Prabhupada their grand plan. And he didn't say a word. He just was walking and so now they're coming back to the temple, and he hadn't said a word. Almost to the top of the stairs, and he turned around, and he goes, yes, but if you associate with these women, and then he pointed to us with his walking stick, you'll go back to Godhead. So that was the end of that grand plan. Now, just to tell you another part of what happened, as women, of course, we were feeling a little sorry for the inconvenience. And across the street from the temple, there is a pond, a kund. And we saw ladies bathing there. So we thought, we'll bathe in the pond too, and that will eliminate some of the tension. So this went on for a few days. And then one of Prabhupada's friends and a well-wisher, he came and he said, Swamiji, your women are bathing in the pond with the prostitutes. So it turned out these other ladies were prostitutes. So it didn't look so good for us to be over there. So then we were back to the temple. I mean, nowadays everything is just on such a different level. But our mission, Prabhupada was clear about his female disciples. These women are not ordinary women. They're preachers, they are Vaishnavas, and by their association, one becomes a Vaishnava. And our mission is to see Sarva Sukhino Bhavantu, to see everyone become happy. We don't want to see that we exploit someone else and become happy. No, we want to see everyone happy. So we're trying to spread this Krishna consciousness movement so that everyone can become happy. Krishna consciousness means facilitating all devotees so that they remain enthusiastic and determined to grow to their full potential. And Srila Prabhupada offered us that facility. Us as followers are meant to offer the same Krishna consciousness facility to others. So protection in Krishna consciousness is ultimately meant to give one the ability to advance spiritually. And the protection of Krishna is that you are perpetually protected. This Tvaktam Deham Punar Janma Nayate. You don't get any more material body. That is the real protection being offered in Krishna consciousness. And to serve in the association of Krishna's sincere devotees, that's another form of protection. And when in such an environment, women can fully use their talents and their proclivities in Krishna's service. Prabhupada mentioned in a lecture in Nairobi in 1975, yes, women should always be protection, but protection doesn't mean negligence. Protection means to give her all facilities. That is protection. And protection ultimately means that as far as possible, we remove the physical, mental, and emotional obstacles to someone else's spiritual progress, to facilitate and to encourage devotional service. That is what devotional service is about. And Srila Prabhupada protected women by educating us about our true identities as spirit souls, by engaging us in devotional service, a process where we could attain liberation from death and rebirth, the ultimate protection. So I won't continue because the time factor here. But he gave female disciples responsibility, heads of the Pujari department, pujaris, preachers, book distributors, art department heads, headmistress. Jyotirmayi was the headmistress of the school in Novel Mayapur. There's a wonderful picture of her sitting and preaching to her, teaching her young students under this great ancient oak tree that had seen there. It had been there during the French Revolution. And Srila Prabhupada also sat under that oak tree and performed initiation ceremonies. He actually told my god sister Mahaguna, she was Japanese, said, you should become a TP, a temple president in Tokyo. So he was broad-minded, Prabhupada, just wanted the best for all of us, men and women. Or as he would sometimes say, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. So, just a few thoughts, because I know right now, if you haven't heard about it, you'll hear about it. There is some tension, and it's based on the bodily concept of life. But we don't want to go there. There's no need to go there. And Prabhupada taught us how not to go there. If you have any comments or any questions.
Any questions from anybody?
Thank you so much for wonderful class.
Is there a microphone for her?
Yes. तो एक बार दबाओगे ना चालू रहेगा. Just press once.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Please accept my humble obeisances. Such a wonderful class, Mother. I was thinking, I think last week, as we got this information that you're visiting, I told all my Matajis here and I said, we can ask something related with the women. And then when I heard like you're talking about women, I got so happy. So it was such a wonderful class. So I do have one question, is like you mentioned, like whoever preaches, Srila Prabhupada said, like they will become, I mean Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I think you're talking about the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, become a spiritual master, whether it is a gents, whether it is ladies or whoever. So I'm thinking in our ISKCON movement, it's, I mean, I cannot see much lady spiritual master. So what is the reason behind this?
That is what they call a loaded question. You know, I was GBC, I retired after 27 years. And so now I'm what they call GBC emeritus. And I kind of joke. Now they can't fire me. I can say what I want. I generally did. You can say what you want, you know, just you learn how to speak. But honestly, right now, I just can't believe that there are people with the mindset, when you read over and over Prabhupada's purports, when you read his letters, when you hear his speaking. It was asked right out by one professor, so can women be gurus? Yes, why not? What is qualification? You become qualified. You want to know a joke among the women? A joke among the women is like, so the men have had their opportunity to fall down, give us a chance. Because there has, let's be honest, there's been many failures among the male gurus. So our joke is, okay, give us a chance. Not that we intend to fall down. But from the very beginning, Srila Prabhupada spoke to us, I want all of you, my spiritual sons and daughters, it's in writing, his writing, become gurus. It's not for us. What is guru? Prabhupada would often use the word students, my students, instead of the big D word, the disciple word. Personally, I think we should use the student word and just kind of tone things down a bit. Because the guru is a teacher. If you see things for what they are and not become enamored by what you think is a big, big position, it's a big responsibility. Human life means responsibility. And whoever has the ability to take up that responsibility and execute it successfully, whether it is male or female, we need that. We want that. Look what's going on in the world today. It's just insanity. This is Kali Yuga. Do you think it's going to get any better? It's not. So we have a big obligation to spread this Krishna consciousness movement, and we need all the help we can get. We don't need to be tied down. We need to be let free so we can get out there. And just as Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur, you go to every town and village, you go to everyone you meet. My dear sir, my dear person, please chant Hare Krishna. And teach them about Krishna. When Prabhupada was about to come to America, he went to Srivasangam. And he had gone there many, many times before as a grihastha and chanted in the back of the temple. And then the person, the pujari, he would always see how sincere this person was in his chanting. And then he didn't see him for a long time. And then one day, he sees a gentleman in saffron who he had not seen before that he could recollect. And he's watching him, and he said, "This is my old friend." And he went up to greet him. And of course it was Prabhupada. And he says, he begged for the blessings of this person. "Give me your blessings. My spiritual master has given me an impossible task. To go to America, to go to the West, even necessarily America, go to the West and teach these people about Radha and Krishna. They are suffering because they don't know about Radha and Krishna. Please bless me." And he entrusted us with the same task. Everyone sitting in this room, you have the same obligation to go out and speak about Krishna, to induce people, to teach people. And some people are more capable to do that. But doesn't mean you can't find some way. And those who are more capable should be given the capacity to help increase the numbers. Not that we're trying to become a bigger and better society. We're trying to save people from the hellish condition of material life. So those who can do so should be given all facility. They shouldn't be held back. They shouldn't be subjugated. And I feel very sorry for those persons who are doing that, because they're doing a great disservice to Srila Prabhupada. So I'll stop there. But I think you get the idea.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mother. Anybody?
Mataji, when I got to know that you will be coming here, I thought you have spent so much time with Srila Prabhupada. So I will ask you to share some pastime. I thought of 3 pastime. I don't know if you have time to do that. One pastime showing Prabhupada's compassion. There might be many pastimes. We know Prabhupada was very compassionate. Then one pastime where he was angry, right? I know Prabhupada might have anger for good reason. So I want to know that pastime, if you can share. And the other pastime where he was very happy, like jokingly telling something funny way, like that. Three different stories.
Which pastime are you referring to about anger?
Huh?
You mentioned a pastime of anger.
Anger, not exactly anger means like, he's angry, but he will be like chastising, like in press conferences. Anybody is talking against Krishna, right? So he will not take that. Right, so like that.
Actually, sometimes it bewildered the devotees. Prabhupada was so strong. Like most of you have children, and if you see somebody harming your child or speaking harsh, you aren't going to take it. At least I hope not. So Prabhupada also, he wouldn't take someone speaking down on Krishna. Maybe tomorrow I'll speak a little on that. Very interesting story, but we were invited to North India for a Samalian. It was for the Gita Jayanti, actually. And the people that invited us were impersonalists. Okay, they read Gita, and Prabhupada went in and he sees there's not even one picture of Krishna in the whole auditorium, and it's supposed to be Gita Jayanti. Anyway, that was really interesting how he pointed this out. And one time in Bombay, big program, there was this person, he started to argue with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada just didn't take it. He argued back with him. The devotees were bewildered. But they'd never, it was a little ferocious. And this person was really offensive. So afterwards, a few of us were in it was a big tent program, and then we had a little room in the back for, I think you call it the green room, the staging room, so we were there. I was there. Giridhar Swami was there, other notable devotees were there, and we're kind of discussing the situation, I was listening. And then that man who had caused the disturbance came in. And he said something, I don't even remember what it was, but against Prabhupada. And I just there was no thought, I just punched him. Right in the stomach. No thought, it just happened. And all the men were so happy because they told me afterwards they also wanted to do it, but they, they couldn't do that. So sometimes there's some mercy in the body of a woman. How can you hear about your spiritual master being blasphemed? Actually, Tamal Krishna Goswami, one of the early great devotees, so had this book, A Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti. And he wrote in there, he noted, in addition to noting the many ways that the women were contributing. And by the way, let me tell you, Tamal Krishna Goswami wasn't always so magnificent. He went through a period. I think a lot of the men did. They were young. They became swamis. It was like they didn't quite realize what they were getting into. So just like they wanted to get us out of the building in Calcutta, Tamal Krishna took it a step further. He wanted to get us out of the entire country. And he found out in those days, Australia was trying to build up. So they would give free passage to anybody who would go there. So his plan was get all the women on a boat, free passage, and send us to Australia. Prabhupada caught wind of that, and it didn't. Anyway, later he matured. That was an immature thing. So he mentioned in his book, in addition to noting the many ways women contributed, Srila Prabhupada credited his movement's success to the magnetic presence of the ladies. That people were attracted by the presence of the ladies. He said otherwise many people might not have come, they might not have stayed if they came. There's so many, how many know Devamrit Swami? Anyway, he's a very wonderful. He got caught up by one devotee. He was he just got caught. We were always on the street. He caught him trying to sell him a book. He said, I don't have any money. She goes, oh, where do you live? I'll go to your hall. I'll wait. You can go get. He was so she followed him. She went with him to his house. She didn't go inside. She waited outside. I mean, who would do that? Such a powerful creature. And because of that, he got the book. And because he paid for the book, he decided to read the book. He was a highly educated person. But we had some very powerful women in this movement. And they weren't trying to be strong to show up. They were using whatever strength and power that we were given to present Krishna consciousness to others. Because that's what we saw Prabhupada doing.
Anybody, any questions? Yeah.
Try again, because I can't hear you.
Wonderful session. Are you able to hear me? Speak louder. Hare Krishna. Wonderful session. Thank you. I have a very silly question. Before your Krishna consciousness, you might have believed the Jesus is the Lord. But later on, when Srila Prabhupada visited to Western world, right? Krishna is the God. Like how the transformation happened with your intelligence.
You were saying that I had a belief in Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, any Western...
Actually, the reality of my life was I didn't have a belief. My family said they were Christians, but it was just a word. And then I started thinking there had to be something more than I saw around me. What I saw around me wasn't attractive to me. I was in a new suburb. They were developing new suburbs. I didn't want that. And I heard about God, not necessarily Jesus, but God. I wanted to, and I asked my mother. She goes, "Why are you asking that?" Didn't have answers. My father and I were not so much compatible as far as talking. So I took myself to church to find out. And I wasn't finding out anything. From a very early age, I understood I wasn't this body. That much I knew, clear. Okay, then what was I? That was my question. So that's why I was going to church, to find out what I was. And guess what? Just like my mother, they're like, "Why are you asking that question?" I couldn't even answer. It was like basic math. I couldn't answer. It was only until I met Srila Prabhupada that I found out what I was. That, yes, I wasn't the body. I was spirit soul. But that wasn't even the end. That was just the beginning. That every spirit soul had a deep and unique relationship with God, the Supreme Personality. In fact, just that expression, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where do you hear that? Only from Prabhupada, only in Prabhupada's books. So that is when things took a shift for me. Because now I understood. There was no doubt I wasn't the body, but then what was I? And nobody could answer that question. And I went to a lot of different situations with that question.
Any other questions, anybody? Okay, no questions then. Let's thank Malati Mataji for giving a wonderful session. We're chanting Hari Bol 3 times. Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Thank you, Mataji, for a wonderful session.
The wonderful thing is, so we can understand, there are men, there are women. We understand that. But those are the superficial designations, and Prabhupada was tearing it down. Okay, you've got a certain designation, and in that designation there are certain activities. We get that. But there is nothing that prevents anyone from Krishna Bhakti. He wrote in a letter to Guru Das, "I've always accepted the service of women." He told Himavati that in the Gita it says that the women are equal with the men in regards to Krishna consciousness. So get out there and prove it by practical action, meaning preaching. There's no need of competition. We're in this together, and each has a part to play, to complement each other and to help each other serve Krishna. And then our lives become beautiful. And hopefully we can make some influence in this horrible world. People say, "Why are you so negative?" Well, just tell me something positive about this world of birth, death, disease, and old age. That's our secondary mantra. First you learn the Hare Krishna mantra, then you learn birth, death, disease, old age. But we want to get out of that. And it's not escapism, because then we enter into the real life. Prabhupada wrote the beautiful poem, "The Real Life as Chaitanya Has Wrought." and it's for all of us, not just people from India, not just, and that's the other part of this thing that's going on, the the shadow underneath the story. Prabhupada flat out said, I love my American disciples. I love my English disciples. And he had really incredible disciples from India also. To speak of, Radha Govind Swami and his brother Radha Raman Swami. And oh my God, I was there in Montreal when Gopal Krishna came. It was just this little guy, this little Indian guy, and he was a marketer for Pepsi Cola. But he was very good at it. So then he was, starting to help Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was seeing he's very qualified and was giving him some service to do. And then he was thinking, maybe I should just quit this job and join the devotees full time. And Prabhupada said, you are not a karmi. You're with this job, you're doing very valuable service, because he was contributing towards the temple and he was meeting people. So you're not a karmi. Karmi, when you work hard to get money for sense gratification, but that's not what he was doing. And then later on, he got an offer to go to America. So he asked Prabhupada, which would have been increased. Prabhupada said, good idea. Increased finance. Prabhupada was a very practical person. And whatever could increase the Krishna consciousness, the preaching mood of Krishna consciousness, and whichever could help us become closer to Krishna, that was where we should go. So I thank you all very much. And sometimes people will say, it's really hard. Like 16 rounds, that. It's hard. It's hard is not our mantra. And Prabhupada wrote in a letter to me that, because I was really struggling when we went to England, and I had this little baby, and we had no address, we had no money. We borrowed money to get there, but then we had to send it back to show to get into the country. Because at that point they were like, didn't want hippies, so we had to show that we had financial wherewithal. So we borrowed money, and we came in 2 by 2. Then we'd send the money back to the next couple that was over, we got into this called Hook on Holland, and you take a ferry across. So 2 by 2 we came in. And then the money got lost, and then sending it back to America. Prabhupada. And Shyam Sundar, who was the one who had made the arrangement, he was devastated. And Prabhupada wrote in a letter, don't worry, because it was a 5th-class bank. But, things got found. But we saw that Prabhupada took a risk at such an age to get on this boat, come to America on a boat. It was a freighter, okay, but let me tell you something. I heard one time that the freighter, the Jaladuta, was going to be demolished, going to be, scrapped. I thought, I just want to see it before that happens. So I went to Bombay in those days, to the dock, to the yard, and I'm looking all the freighters, and I'm looking, where's... And then I didn't see it. I'm just looking up and where all the names on the boats were. And then I see this guy, and I say, Kaha, Jaladuta, Kaha, where is Jaladuta? He points down. And there's this little tiny thing compared to the other boats. And I thought, my God, I wouldn't even have been on that boat to go outside the harbor, to speak. He went through 7 seas to get to America in this little tiny thing. He was brave. He took a risk. The least we can do is like step up our act. Yeah, so he came here. It wasn't easy for him, and when we went to the UK, it wasn't easy for us. He came without money. We went there without money. You know, credit cards were just becoming a thing, but we didn't even know what they were, and we certainly didn't have one. And so every day the devotees would go out to look to try to find a place, and I would stay back. I would do the laundry for everybody. I would do the cooking, which meant I had to do the shopping, and take care of my baby, and have a husband too. So I did everybody's laundry, so that they could somehow or other find a place. We needed to have our place, but I was finding it difficult. So I wrote this letter to Prabhupada, and I asked him, did you find it difficult when you were at Grihastha to practice Krishna consciousness? I mean, actually, that was not an appropriate question in one way, but Prabhupada was so merciful. And he wrote back, he said, so you have asked if I found it difficult when I was at Grihastha to practice Krishna consciousness. And yes, I did. But then he was explaining his difficulty. He says, my wife and my family were not interested in Krishna consciousness. They weren't interested to help. So that was his difficulty. And then he went on to tell me that just chant 16 rounds. Take care of your... I had mentioned that I had the original small little Jagannath deities with me. And I was wondering, how do I take care of these deities and, the family and do all the... He goes, the most important thing is to chant 16 rounds. You can take care of the deities after you do your other work, housework and whatever, But the most important thing, chant 16 rounds. And if you're like that, if you determine, Krishna will help you. He repeated in another, Krishna will help you. So sometimes, I don't know, here you have your families, you have these big houses to take care of, and, not easy. But somehow or other, try to get those 16 rounds in, figure out some way that you can do it. And Krishna will see you're sincere and he'll help you. And there may be someday some situation where it won't happen because you're doing just so much. So that can happen sometimes, but it shouldn't be like the everyday happening. Just Prabhupada told Shamsundar that Arjuna wasn't chanting 16 rounds on the battlefield. But we don't take advantage of that. We don't beat ourselves over the head. We try to figure out a way how we can get those 16 rounds done. And then Prabhupada told how he told Shuddhakirti, so he would do 4 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, 4 in the late afternoon, and 4 in the evening. He broke it up, And that's one way. I'm sure nobody here has any problem with that, right? 16 rounds, no problem.
What about services? What about the services? Like chanting is the one part, but at the same time we have to serve also.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the temple, in the center, the devotees who are visiting. So
Somehow we have to figure out how to do this. Krishna has given us intelligence. So with that intelligence he's given us. And nowadays it's like before we all kind of were living near the temple, and now sometimes the temple's like, 40 minutes away or something, Just do your best and Krishna will help you. don't look for a way out, look for a way in, but if it happens, you just, on some occasion, you just can't make it, just don't break your brain about it. Just ask Krishna, please help me a little more, I need some help. And don't take it out on your family, don't take it out on other devotees. This happens sometimes. You get upset, you get angry, Chill, just, chill out. Because even the worst devotee is better than the best karmi. When you think about it, why? Because they're trying to love Krishna. We have to be a little kind to each other, and we have to be kind to ourselves too.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you all very much for taking time out of your, what I know is very busy lives.
Mahaprasade Govinde, Mahaprasade Govinde, Namo Brahmane Vaishnave, Namo Brahmane Vaishnave, Svalpa Punya
Krishna.
Svalpa Punya
विश्वासो नैव जायते शरीरा वित्याज जोडेन्द्रिया ताहेक जीवे फले विषय सागरे फले विषय सागरे तार मध्य जीवातीत